to talk about my UFO experience real quick. It's just been on my mind for a while. Felt like I should put on my YouTube channel just because I really do think that 2021 is going to be the year some more stuff starts coming out and the leaks start becoming from the government rather than from the people within the United States or other places around the world. Don't leak it from their random sources, but the government is going to start to actually start giving this stuff to the people, saying, hey, here's what we know is really going on. There's something the coronavirus stimulus bill that got passed, I guess, saying that a certain committee has to give away what they know. I'm not too versed in that, but apparently it was thrown in there. It's talked about on the Joe Rogan Experience. But anyway, came to talk about my story. So this story all starts probably in right around 2012, late 2012. I became a sensor operator on an aircraft, which the plane is right there. That's it. And I flew on that thing for a little while, did some time on that, and I deployed in 2013 to the southern part of Afghanistan. And I flew out of an air base down there. That being said, we did a lot of reconnaissance type missions with that sensor. Obviously, a lot of route scanning, a lot of following convoys that we were involved with, kinetic strikes, even though we didn't have any weapons specifically on our aircraft. We played a role in the kinetic strike type part, calling in medevacs, infill, exfil of helicopters in and out of their landing zones, making sure their landing zone was safe before they came in, and then before they left, making sure everything was good to go on their flight path out, making sure nobody's going to take pot shots with AKs or RPGs or whatever. We also did some pickups of people who weren't so good people, and we would assist in going to help pick those people up. But anyway, what I'm going to talk about is the surveillance piece of it with my story. And with my story, for example, it would do a lot of like people leaving their FOBs, which is their forward operating base. And we would watch them leave and go to wherever they were going and make sure that they were safe along their route. We would scan ahead of them. We would scan to the sides of them, making sure that there's nobody around there hiding in the bushes, a little snake in the grass saying, hey, or somebody's not going to jump out and start shooting you. We know what's going down. So anyway, this story all starts with, I was flying late at night. Typically all that cool stuff that I mentioned before, like watching people get blown up or crazy stuff that was happening that we were a part of, picking people up, picking up the bad people, throwing them in a helicopter and flying them away. Typically all that stuff happened during the day or early into the night. When you start flying later at night, early in the morning, like 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, it gets pretty mundane. There's not too much going on. And then also drifting into 5 o'clock is probably when it's going to start heating back up again. But anyway, this all started when I was out there. This is probably 4 months into a 6-month deployment. And this happened. I was flying the late lines. We would switch all the time, but I would have to be flying the late lines when this happened. So I was flying at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm watching this Afghan convoy. It was strictly Afghans in soft-shelled Humvees. There was 4 Humvees, probably around 16 Afghans, I'd imagine. 16 to 20 Afghans. And I watched them leave from their FOB, their forward operating base. I watched them leave, and they started heading out down the road. Now, we knew where they were going to go. We just didn't know when it was going to happen, but as soon as we got on station, they pretty much left, so that was kind of good timing. Um, well, I'm watching them go down the road or whatever. They're gonna end up linking up with some other Afghans, like an hour or so down the road. This is happening in the southwesternmost part of Afghanistan, an area called the Rajasthan Desert. And if you look at a map of Afghanistan, in the southwestern part, there's about 1/3 of the country, kind of like a little slash of the country, that is just all desert. And when I mean desert, I'm talking about like not sand, not dirt. I'm talking about moon dust. This stuff literally felt like it was the surface of the moon. That kind of dust. There was some sand as well, like grains, like you would find on a beach, or like what you would think would be in a desert. There was that, but the edges of it was crazy. It was like moon dust, like a powder, like baby powder. But anyway, the boogers were insane that you would get out there, but that's besides the point. So I'm watching these guys drive through the desert. There's nothing around them, absolutely nothing besides sand dunes. And probably around an hour into the mission, my co-pilot starts falling asleep. The guy in the back of the aircraft who sits behind me, he's falling asleep. There's only 4 of us in the aircraft, so it's just me and the pilot who are awake. And we're bullshitting like we always do, just talking about stuff. And I was in IR mode because it's at night and I can't see anything in my full motion video in my daytime because it would just be black. But I'm in IR, and I always go in black hot. So the trucks, the Humvees, were black because they were hot, because the engine block. The desert was probably the same color as that F-15 is in the actual, game that I'm playing. Anyway. Out of the left side of my camera, my field of view, an object flies and it's going pretty fast. I would probably say mile an hour wise, it was probably moving around 100 miles an hour. And the reason I say 100 mile an hour, like I say that lightly, was because when you saw objects from that high up, from an altitude around 18,000 feet, let's say, I don't remember how high we were, but around 18,000 feet, objects that move fast, like they gotta be moving like 200 miles an hour or like 300 miles an hour for you not to be able to see them, or just like see them in a split second. Like this thing, I could see, I saw it clearly and it caught my attention. Even I don't remember if I was looking at the screen. I think I was, but I caught it and I was able to think, what the heck was that? Let me look over there and track that. Because it's a foreign object around this convoy that I'm supposed to be watching. So I was like, hey, did you see that on the feed? Because they had up in the cockpit, they have a little feed of what I'm looking at. It's a tiny little TV that they just suction cup onto the window. And he said no, obviously because it's too small, he couldn't see it. So I'm start tracking this thing, and as I zoom in, he's able to see it a little bit bigger on his screen. And I'm tracking this thing, and it's coming up white hot, which is weird. Or it's coming up white when I'm looking at black hot, which is weird, because typically when I'm looking at something flying, it's going to be hot. Birds are hot when they fly. Vehicles are obviously hot when they're driving. You can see just the engine block is typically hot. Just the hood of the vehicle is hot. And the rest of the vehicle will be cool, obviously, because of the wind. Parked vehicles are really hot, especially in Afghanistan. And then planes, you can see the engines are hot. I've seen vehicles before flying, aerial vehicles like planes, and they're hot. This wasn't hot at all. It was probably the size of a beach ball, your standard beach ball, not your extra large, and not your small one, your standard beach ball, you know what I mean? And it was moving pretty fast, around 100 miles an hour, so I start tracking this thing. And as I start tracking it, it was moving in a pretty straight line across the desert, probably around 1,000 feet above the ground. Between 500 and 1,000 feet, I'd say, above the ground. And it's moving from east to west. And as I start tracking this thing, I don't know what it was doing before, but when it came across my field of view, it was going in a straight line. But as I'm watching this for a good 20 seconds, it starts to slow down from 100 miles an hour, probably to like 60, 70 miles an hour. And then all of a sudden it stops and then makes these dashes, like it's dashing from point here, point here, point here, point here, and then it's moving along its trajectory again, and it's changing at various speeds, which was weird. Now when it stopped, it didn't just stop and just sit there for like a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It stopped there for like a second, to where you could see it stop. It definitely stopped in midair, but then it immediately went on a different course, different bearing than what it was doing before. And that's weird. That's freaking weird. Still to this day, I don't know what it was. That's the best description I could give you. Is it was cold when it should have been hot. Had no exhaust. You can see vehicle exhaust a little bit, but what you could really see is other plane exhaust. An F-18, an F-15. If I was watching that flying, I could see the exhaust coming out the back, and it's very, very obvious. I've seen prop planes, the exhaust pipes that are on the sides of prop planes, like the one that I flew when I was looking at crews that I knew, our fellow crewmates coming back from a mission as we were about to go into a mission, and we would pass them on the way to and from the base. I would look over at them, and I'm sure they were looking at me, just screwing around, and I'm looking at their engines. I can see the exhaust coming out. And with birds, they're always hot. Obviously, they don't have exhaust. I mean, they could. They farted, but this thing didn't have an exhaust. It was just cold. It was a cold beach ball flying through the air. I don't know what to make of it. I honestly don't. It still to this day confuses the hell out of me. I don't know what it possibly could have been. I know of aircraft that are developmental that the United States military has, but they all produce exhaust. So it wasn't one of those, and they're bigger than that. This wasn't a drone either. I don't know of any drone that can fly. Commercial drone, okay, something that the Taliban or ISIS would have. I don't know of any type of those drones that can move 100 miles an hour and then stop on a dime. Typically when a drone stops, it's going to slow down because it's still dealing with wind, and it still needs to, it can't just stop on a dime. If a drone's doing like 30 miles an hour, it could stop on a dime probably, but not 100 miles an hour, there's no way. It's got to slow down. This went from 100 miles an hour to 0. Flip of a switch. It just blows my mind. I just don't understand it. So anyway, I'm watching this thing, and it just flew in a straight line, continued to do the zigzag pattern all the way out until my screen got so blurry that I couldn't see it anymore. It just disappeared. It didn't poof disappear like Commander David Fravor. If you ever heard his UFO story, his just disappears. gone in a flash, is what he says. This one didn't disappear like that. It just got so far away from me that there was degradation on my end, and my camera wasn't good enough to continue to see it. So it was grainy, and then it wasn't there anymore. I couldn't see it because the camera was too much junk, But it was probably 10, 15 miles away at that point, 20 miles away, and then I started to lose it. But anyway, me and my pilot continued to talk about that, what we saw. I don't remember our whole conversation, but we were both confused. It was kind of funny to us. Like, what in the heck was that type of deal? Obviously, there was speculation up front of, an alien invasion or whatever, but at first I was just screwing around, I think we both were. But honestly, there's no military asset that I know of that is that size, that shape, and can do that and checks all three of those boxes. There's just no way. So I land, and we have an intel unit, an intel team that's attached to our unit, to where if anything were to go down on one of these missions, or we happen to come across some intelligence that might be useful, we end up passing it off to them. I don't know why my screen got so bright, but it did. I got no intelligence on this mission. It was just watching these dumpers, these Afghans, drive from point A down a shitty little road to point B. That's it. That's all that happened. So obviously there was nothing to report. NSTR, nothing significant to report. I land and I go to my intel shop anyway. So we flew with a DVR and it recorded the entire mission. This DVR was huge and could record several missions. And I recorded the whole mission. I brought that over to my intel shop, showed it to him. There was a lieutenant who was working at the time. She had no idea what it was. She thought it was funny, just like I did, but at the same token, I didn't know what it was. There was a senior airman as well working there at that time, who was also an intel person, who was an E4 in the Air Force, and they had no idea either. So it's just kind of one of those things. I asked them, hey, do you guys need to confiscate this for, I don't know if this was an experimental aircraft or what, but do you need to confiscate this DVR? Do you need the video? She was like, no, I don't need this, as if like that was a stupid question. I remember this specifically. She asked it, and she was like, no, I don't need this. She honestly treated me like that was a stupid question, which is fine. Didn't hurt my feelings, but I was asking before I go and delete this thing, and then some people in black suits come and find me. So I was like, all right, cool. So I go back and I'm confused. I don't know what I just witnessed, but anyway, I'm turning in all my gear at the end of a flight like I do, and part of that's turning in the DVR. So I turn in the DVR, and I'm signing it back in, saying, yeah, I returned it, and then who was sitting at the ops desk at the time, so they saw me do it. And another crew comes in who's about to step to their aircraft to fly off, and I remember this guy came in. I'll just call him B. Anyway, B comes in, and he is 2 ranks above me. He was a staff sergeant. I was an airman first class at the time. And Sergeant B comes in, And he was like, "Hey man, how was your flight?" And I say, "Good," like confused. He's like, "What's up?" I was like, "I don't know, man. I saw something weird." So I think he's thinking now that I saw something go down to where it was like a mental health type of thing. Like, hey, is this dude all right? So he inquires about it. He was like, "Well, go ahead, man. Tell me about it." I was like, "Dude, I saw this thing that I can't even explain." He was like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "It was moving pretty quick. Um, it was like a beach. It was like a cold beach ball. I don't know." He goes, "Stop." And he begins to describe to me the exact same thing I just saw, which that in itself was pretty crazy. That he was able to, I gave him that little bit of information, he was able to tell me, let me guess, it like stopped and did these little like pattern type of things. It's like boom, 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 pew, and then it's off again type of thing. And I was like, yeah, man. He's like, yeah, I saw those in Iraq and also in Northern California. And I was like, no way. I was like, what was it? He was like, I don't know. But do you want my answer on what I think it is? And I said, sure, go ahead, because I'm looking for answers. He says, what I think they are is I think they are, man, this sounds crazy, saying this shit on YouTube. He said, I think they're alien recon drones that come here and survey, whatever. They do surveillance on how we conduct war. So in case anything were to happen, if a contact was made and it was we took it as a hostile thing, they would know exactly what we're about to do before we even do it. They're automatically 2 steps ahead of us through the entire process. And that to me, I mean, made sense. It honestly does. I mean, think about it. What does the United States military do before they enter a country? They do reconnaissance on it for months or years. I mean, or even a few weeks, but we're going to do recon and do surveillance of certain regions of a country that we think are going to be the most easiest ways in, or how they conduct operations. It's what we do. And then we send people in and eliminate targets and start knocking stuff out. So we do the same thing. That's what you do. You need the intel first, and then you go and start to fight. You don't just go in there blind and start shooting the place up. That's how things go south real fast. Is if you go in there and start shooting stuff up and you don't know what you're doing, because you could be running into the strongest force ever, and you send half your guys in there when you could have sent the entire place in there or avoided it altogether and flanked them. It's all about intelligence. That's how we conduct war. So that to me made sense, and it still makes sense to this day. That's what was going down. So I've looked up. When I got back in 2013, late 2013, from this deployment, I didn't really think too much of it. I didn't think too much of it for the first probably 2 years. And then for some reason, I don't know why, this started to bother me. Like, seeing what I saw bothered me. So I looked for answers on YouTube. I looked for answers online. I like trying to read articles about it. And honestly, I know Commander Fravors, not his video, because it technically wasn't his video, it was a different crew of the Nimitz. But he described saying, yep, that's exactly what we saw when we were out there, but we didn't get a video of it, but these guys did. That Tic Tac looked exactly like what this thing was, except the Tic Tac's bigger. This object performed the exact same way. When he's looking at it in black hot, the object is colder than the surface area of the water. Um, it fits the bill. It fits the bill. And I'm not here to jump on Commander Fravor's ship, so to speak. No pun intended. But the object that I saw behaved the exact same way as the Nimitz video, the Tic Tac video, performed the exact same way. Except in the Nimitz video, his is moving in a straight line, like right across the top of the water is what it looks like. It's probably, a good 100 feet off the water, I would think. But it's just moving in a straight line, and it's going probably the same speed as mine was. His didn't stop and make the erratic movements like mine did, but it looked the exact same way, except it was smaller, obviously, and it was in the shape of a beach ball. Just blows my mind. I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. If anybody's watching this video, and you have any answers for me, please make a comment. Anything's kind of helpful at this point. I do think 2021 is going to be the year for of leaks from our government saying, hey, this is what we know about this stuff. And I'll say this too. In the Andromeda Galaxy, which is our sister galaxy, there are 100 million stars, I think is what Neil deGrasse Tyson said. 100 million stars. And in our galaxy, the Milky Way, we know that every star has at least one planet. So if you think, okay, that's a law almost, that every star has a planet. That becomes a law. That becomes a thing. That's now, okay, I would think every star in the universe has a planet attached to it. So if you take that over the Andromeda Galaxy that we can see in its full glory, and you see 100 million stars, that's 100 million planets. Now you got to think about, what if you won the Powerball, and that's $100 million? What would you even do with $900,000? That's 900,000 planets. You know what I'm saying? And then you do that 100 times? I'm trying to break down the numbers, and I probably sound like a moron right now trying to break down these numbers, but these numbers are astronomically big. Like, yeah, there's 7 billion people on the Earth, but could you even imagine seeing 100 million people in one group, in one area? That's freaking huge. Huge. The probability alone for life out there, at least even in our galaxy, or the Andromeda Galaxy, it would be so close to impossible for us to be the only ones here, the only ones in the universe. So close to impossible for us to be the only ones. It's not impossible for us to be the only ones. I'm not going to say that, because I guess it is possible for us to be the only ones. But whatever happened to us here on Earth to become the species that can comprehend what we're doing and what our future holds, and what our past brought us, and like, you think a lion cares about its future? Yeah, it cares about living to see the next day and getting enough to eat that day, and then taking care of its cub. And that's it. It doesn't care about the lions that came before it, or the where it came from. It doesn't care. Same thing with a friggin' flamingo. I think flamingo cares about its lineage? No. Doesn't care about its great-great-grandfather. I'm sure you probably don't care about your great-great-grandfather either. You probably never even knew him. But the fact that we have Ancestry.com and the fact that we have history books that tell us what's went down in our cultures before, or across the countries, or wars that have been fought, so we can learn from those mistakes. The intellectual process that takes, you can't tell me that hasn't happened somewhere else out there. And why is our planet the only planet with more than one species of life? We have thousands, hundreds of thousands of species of life here. We have lions and flamingos, like I just named. We also have different species of bugs and shit. They're still finding, every year they're finding new types of, like 7 new types of bugs in the Amazon rainforest. Not even to mention, we don't even know what's in our oceans. We've been at the bottom of the Marianas Trench like, what, 1 to 3 times, I think. I think it's between 1 and 3. Don't quote me on that. But that is insane. You don't even know what's in our waters. And the Pacific is freaking huge. I've never flown over the Pacific before, but I've flown over the Atlantic, and that was enough. That's not even the biggest ocean in the world. And that took hours to cross. And that's just nothing but water. And you don't even know what's in that water. You don't know all that's in that water. You know sharks, you know your rainbow fish, you know your clownfish, you know your dogfish. How is it you're going to sit here and tell me that we are the only planet with hundreds of thousands of species of life on it? Sure, one of those species is intelligent enough to get us off the planet. But how has that not happened? How are you going to tell me that hasn't happened 2 in 100 million times? I'm not buying it, man. I'm not buying it. And when you start getting into the billions, the 100 billion mark of stars, I can't even bring up the numbers. I mean, I could. I got my phone on me, but I'm not going to, because there's billions of stars out there. Could you even fathom a billion of anything? Dollars? People? Like, yeah, sure, I know there's 7 billion people on this planet. But you can't fathom that. You know? You just can't fathom it. The probability is damn near impossible for us to be the only ones. 1. 2. I cannot explain what I saw that night. I can't. I have witnesses that saw it too. I have a dude who finished my sentence for me on what this craft was doing. I have intelligence members who I think have probably seen some crazy shit in their day. They had no idea what this thing was, nor have they seen it before. I'll throw that in there. They haven't seen this before. They haven't seen any sort of UFO or anything like that either. I don't know. Then you have Commander Fravor seeing stuff. That guy 100% is being truthful. Those F-18 pilots who got that video, even the gimbal video off the Atlantic, both great videos. I mean, I don't know how people can say that those are fake. If you guys... Okay, those are fighter pilots. I was a sensor operator. I stare at the ground. Okay, that's my job, to stare at the ground. I'm not supposed to stare at the sky. I'm supposed to stare at the ground. And I know what I'm looking for on the ground and things that are just above the ground. Like birds. I've seen plenty of birds in my day. I've seen plenty of Afghan kids kicking a soccer ball around. I've seen anything on the ground You name it, I've seen it. I've seen camels out in the middle of nowhere, just wandering around with no people near them. Just wild camels. I've seen it all. But these are fighter pilots. These guys are trained to identify aircraft and make a split decision, like their life depends on it, because it does. Especially at the mileage that we're talking about. You can shoot an aircraft down from 8 miles away from another aircraft. You can shoot an aircraft down before you even see that other aircraft because you're pulling on radar. These guys are trained to identify aircraft. They're not screwing this up. They're not misidentifying an aircraft. They've seen it all, like me. They were seasoned guys. They're seasoned F-18 pilots who were spinning up to go deploy and to possibly run into Russian aircraft out there. So how are you going to sit here and tell me that, oh, that was a plane, they're confusing it, or they don't know what they're looking at? And you do? No, man. No, you don't. You don't know what you're looking at. Nobody knows what the heck that was. Nobody knows what they're looking at when you see that. It's just one of those things. It's one of those things where we'll have to wait and see. And I do think there are people out there who know what's going on. And people say it's the U.S. government. How is they're so leaky? They're so leaky. Yeah, there's sometimes shitty people who get brought into projects and programs who leak stuff. That's just a fact of the matter. But there are programs out there that don't see the light of day because there's not a lot of people who are involved in those projects. So the chances of that stuff getting out is slim to none. And I'll tell you what, there's stuff, I can tell you for a fact, there is stuff out there that has not seen the light of day. At least I've never heard it spoken. So take that for what you want to take it for. I'm just some dumpy guy on YouTube, and I know that. So, I mean, take my word for what it is, but that's all. That's all I gotta say. So, anybody knows anything about what you think I saw, or the Commander Fravor video, the gimbal video, the Tech Tac, hit me up. Drop a comment below. We can have a great conversation about this. Like I said, I do think 2020 is going to be our year finding stuff out. So until then, not much we can do but sit here and wait.